Well, after a losing skid that has caused the Blues to falter in the wild card race, general manager Doug Armstrong is trying to shake things up with the NHL roster. He's traded defenseman Scott Perunovich to the Islanders, and forward Brandon Saad and the Blues have agreed to a contract termination. A couple big moves that went down this week. So today we'll react to both of these moves. What do they mean for the Blues? What are the implications for other Blues players like maybe Texier and others? And what do these moves mean for the Blues for the remainder of this season and beyond? Is Doug Armstrong giving up on this season, or is he preparing to maybe use this cap space to do something else? What does it mean for future seasons, like next season in particular? We're going to talk about all that and more today on Note News. Welcome into Note News. It's John and Alec with you as always. If you're just joining us for the first time, we're a St. Louis Blues podcast. We go live twice a week to talk all things Blues. Obviously, how the NHL level club is doing, but we also talk young players and prospects. Draft, NHL trade deadline buzz, free agency, all that kind of stuff. So if you're interested in that and enjoy what we're talking about, then be sure to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're also on audio on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, so you can follow and rate the podcast wherever you listen. We appreciate that. And we're on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Note News Pod, so you can follow us there, see graphics, memes, shorter videos, and our announcements for when we're going live. So be sure to follow along with us on all those platforms. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into it because we got a lot to talk about today. But first, Alec, do you like the movie Moneyball?
It's a classic.
It's a classic. Do we potentially have a Moneyball situation on our hands? We don't have to really get in. We'll get into this later, but do we have a Moneyball situation on our hands?
I totally see it. And I don't know that I like that I see it
Yeah.
because that meant there was some tension in the front office, and Army's are only been here like a couple months, but let's not start the
Monty.
episode there. Yeah, sorry, Monty.
Yeah. No, we can we can start off on a different note, but we'll get there. I just saw Army's quote and I was like, that's Moneyball. That's Moneyball right there.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, let's start. Let's just take this in chronological order. So obviously, the first sort of headline in Blues land this week was the Scott Perunovich trade. The Blues traded defenseman Scott Perunovich to the New York Islanders. Words are hard. And in return, they got a conditional fifth round draft pick. The conditions of that draft pick, I don't believe, are like public knowledge at this point. At least it wasn't when the trade was made, and I haven't seen anything about those conditions. But it's, if I had to guess, contingent on Perunovich's playing time, or like games played, things like that. So it remains to be seen what those conditions are. But they get a fifth round draft pick in exchange for Scott Perunovich, and that sort of ends Perunovich's frustrating tenure with the Blues. It is kind of disappointing that it ended this way, but he won the Hobie Baker Award in 2020 at the University of Minnesota Duluth, and it was really exciting. He profiled as like a legit offensive defenseman, a power play threat, and a potential like long-term partner for Colton Parayko. Those were sort of our hopes and dreams for Scott Perunovich. But sadly, he never really lived up to that. In his 97 games played as a Blue, he only had 2 goals and 27 assists. Both of those goals came this season, and he tacked on 4 assists this season and 24 games played, so only 6 points this year with the Blues. But he is no longer with the team. He has been traded to the Islanders, as I said. But Alec, I want to get your reactions to this trade. Like, just first of all, what are your reactions to this trade? Why do you think this trade was made? Like, how did we get to this point with Scott Perunovich?
I mean, anyone who's been tuned into the Blues in the past year and a half probably could have seen this coming. So it definitely isn't surprising to me. It is unfortunate. Like, it's just it didn't work out for Scotty P, and that really sucks because you want every player to be the next Wayne Gretzky, but
Yeah.
with Perunovich, it was just he wasn't getting playing time, and so the best thing for him to do, the best thing for his future, and honestly the team, is to avoid all of this confusion and whatnot, was to move on. And so it sucks that it came to this, but that's what had to happen.
Yeah.
Um, I am surprised, honestly, and maybe this is just my like me always being perplexed by Scotty P, but I am a little bit surprised by the return. A fifth round pick is nothing to sneeze at. It's not great, but for a defenseman who had proved very little up to this point and is running out of NHL time before he has to be signed to a real NHL contract, um, like Scott Prunovich was just not anywhere near a player that I thought would return for a fifth round pick. Um, I mean, arguably on the same level of guys like P.O. Joseph, and the fact that we got a return for Scott Perunovich was excellent. Now,
Yep.
people are going to say that this is the next Jake Wallman, this is the next Vince Dunn, this is the next time, the next example of the Blues giving up on a defenseman too early. But I don't think that's entirely fair here. The Scott Perunovich era ended when I think you put it. I mean, you accurately stated his stats. He had 2 goals. He had
Yeah.
2 goals in almost 100 NHL games.
Yeah.
Vince Dunn was one thing. Yeah, he should have been protected, and just that situation was weird. And Jake Wallman, also, it felt like they didn't give him a lot of time. But Perunovich had almost 100 NHL games. That's like over a season and then
Hmm.
some to prove anything. And you can only take expected numbers so far. At some point, you do need production. So
Yep.
I'm surprised by the return. I think it's fine, a fine return, and it was always going to happen. So I'm okay with how it went down.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that it had to end this way. If I had to, say like, how did we get here? Like answering that question, I mean, it almost made sense that this trade came now. It's sort of there wasn't really any room for Scott Perunovich anymore. I think one of his biggest issues was obviously, injuries and being limited in that way for a long time, but also it just seemed like a confidence thing a lot. For a small guy like him to have confidence issues and not be able to fall back on something like size, I'm sure that didn't make it any easier for him. But really, he didn't shoot enough for someone who's an offensive defenseman. He didn't take shots enough. He was sort of preferred to pass more, and he also struggled defensively, um, mostly at 5-on-5. But really, what we saw this season is with the addition of Cam Fowler and the arrival of Tyler Tucker, and Tyler Tucker solidifying his spot on the third pair. There just like there wasn't a spot for Perunovich anymore. He just wasn't finding playing time, and so I think we saw this move coming. I don't. I hesitate to say that it's like necessarily the right move. Um, well, I don't know because Scott Perunovich hasn't been a difference maker, and he probably won't be a significant difference maker for the Islanders either. Um, but it just felt weird that the Blues didn't want to commit to him more this season. I get it in seasons prior where he was obviously struggling, and while his individual results didn't stand out this season to this point, right? Only 6 points. I mean, that's not fantastic. While he didn't stand out in that way, the team looked really good around him this season. They were generating, shots on goal, and sort of dominating the possession game with him on the ice for extended periods of time throughout this season, um, and weren't giving up too many, shots and goals the other way with him on the ice. I don't have the numbers pulled up, but do you remember when all those like heat maps were going around of Scott Perunovich's on ice sort of team puck possession and shots on goal and things like that? They were way hot, in the offensive end and icing the other team defensively. And so I was excited about what Scott Perunovich could do this season. I was excited for him to, having had those positive team results when he was on the ice. I was excited to see Jim Montgomery and the Blues give him a more extended look, give him a shot. Maybe he would get some more power play time, something like that, and it just never really materialized. So, I mean, for whatever reason, it seemed like Jim Montgomery and maybe Doug Armstrong as well were just a little bit unwilling to commit to Scott Perunovich in any meaningful way. Probably just uncomfortable with the player that he is and what he brings to the team on the ice. And if you're not comfortable playing him, you might as well trade him, because if he's not playing, he's just holding a roster spot and he's not doing you any good either. So if they weren't going to play him, then yeah, I'm glad they traded him. But I do wish that they had made more of an attempt to commit to the guy, and more of an attempt to sort of resolve any mistakes they made in developing him by committing to him just a little bit more. But I don't know. I mean, like I said, if they were never going to play him and they were never comfortable playing him, then yeah, trade him. So yeah, do you have any thoughts on any of that stuff?
Yeah, just to close out on Scott Perunovich, I think there's two or three things I want to say. I think the reason that they didn't play him, I do see your point, and I totally agree that they like it's weird that they didn't take this season to play him, but
Yeah,
also I kind of see why. The Blues post Stanley Cup win, like that Stanley Cup winning team, one of the biggest factors that led to their surprise run that sort of changed the NHL, honestly, in terms of roster construction, is they had a
hmm,
bunch of big physical defensemen. Post that cup run, the Blues then transitioned to more undersized and technically skilled guys like Torrey Krug, Justin Falk, and have really paid the price since then. And versus you see, LA has now built a team of big, strong defensemen, and they're the best defensive team in the league by a lot. And so it's that, and also the other thing with Scott Perunovich is, if I'm being honest, I think there are plus, give or take 10 Scott Perunoviches in every NHL draft,
yeah,
super potentially offensively talented offensive defensemen who maybe they put it together and become okay players, and more likely they don't. And not only that, they're not 5'10". So I think it was just too many things that it's like, if you're gonna take a risk on a guy, why not have it be someone like a Jake Neighbors who's shown he can play strong, play physical, and forecheck, or
yeah.
another prospect like a Zach Bolduc who has I don't know. But with Scott Perunovich, there's just so many things holding him back. Plus, this team and clearly this front office wants to go back to that big, strong defensive core. And just Perunovich couldn't have been in the picture in that scenario.
Yeah, he didn't really line up with that sort of team identity, defensive identity, like you're saying. Another thing is, like, right or wrong, they think that they have a team that can make the playoffs. They think they have a team that can compete. Um, that dream is kind of dead for this season. But obviously they're going to try to re up and do it again next season. I don't think they're going to try to break it down any further. So yeah, he just didn't really line up with what they're trying to do, which is build a more competitive team. I think if he showed some of the flashes that he showed this season, if he had showed that maybe last season or the season before that, they could have been, ready to give him more time and make a bigger commitment to him. But he just didn't really line up. It seems like with the window that they're trying to compete in, and the retool that they're trying to pull off here. So yeah, um, a comment in the chat. He was too liable defensively and didn't make up for it offensively. Yeah, I mean, definitely a frustrating player, and sad that it had to end this way. So, but we wish all the best to Scotty P, of course, and hope that he can carve himself out a role in New York, and potentially, become the player that we thought he could be. So, best of luck to Scotty P. Do you think there's any discussion to be had on sort of like his spot on the roster as far as like now that he's gone, who fills in? Like obviously Tyler Tucker has sort of established himself as the guy, right? And he is getting most of the looks on that third defensive pair alongside Ryan Suter. But do you think there are any other guys in this conversation that maybe could receive more ice time, that we could get a more extended look at? I got my eye on like a Matthew Kessel again. Theo Loof, could he be called up? Could his NHL debut be coming? Do you have your eyes on any young defenders like that could factor in here?
I don't know what it is about Kessel, if he's just like a hockey quad A player, because he's been pretty good in Springfield, and just I don't
Yeah,
know, he was really not, at least to me, was really not that effective in his minutes in the beginning of the season. Maybe he gets another shot. I do like the Aloof a lot, or Loof. I'm not sure how to say it.
yeah,
Um, but I do like him a lot, and I do also like Anton Malmstrom somewhat, but not more than Matthew Kessel, I guess. Not necessarily less than Matthew Kessel. Um, so
yeah.
I think it kind of feels like, I mean, we haven't heard anything about Letty's injury. It sort of feels like Krug
Yeah,
is done for probably the season. I mean, well, he is done for the season. Excuse me. It
yeah,
feels like Krug is might be done as a Blue.
yeah,
And we haven't heard anything about Letty. But like when we got injured, he said it wasn't that serious, and it's been like 2.5 months now.
yeah.
So if you're gonna have a seventh defenseman, it's
No, it's
probably gonna be a Nick Letty, I would think.
yeah. It's been like 3 months at this point.
Yeah. So
Yeah, yeah. If you would ask me which defenseman that I would want them to prioritize trading away, if you'd ask me who I would pick, it probably wouldn't have been Scott Perunovich first. I think Justin Falk's contract is an issue, and that's one that needs to be moved. But that's probably a discussion for another episode. But yeah, again, just to sort of close out, it's a frustrating end to a frustrating tenure. So I think our sympathies are with Scotty P, and we wish him the best. But yeah, I know Sam, who is at STL Analytics over on Twitter. He likes Loof or Loaf. He likes him a whole lot and wants to see him called up. And so I trust his judgment on that one. So I hope we get to see that guy sometime soon. So yeah, all the best to Scotty P. But let's talk about Brandon Saad now. This is sort of the second big move of the week, and it sort of is a bigger deal here. So yeah, let's get into this discussion. So Doug Armstrong announced on Tuesday that forward Brandon Saad would be placed on waivers and that he'd be assigned to Springfield if he went unclaimed. But then on Wednesday, so yesterday on January 29th, the Blues and Saad agreed to a mutual contract termination after he went unclaimed and was going to be assigned to Springfield. So now he'll be placed on unconditional waivers, and if he goes unclaimed again, he will be a UFA and able to sign wherever he wants, negotiate a new contract with whomever he wants. Kind of an interesting saga here, and it's surprising, right? It's surprising that it got to this point. It's surprising that
yeah,
Saad agreed to just terminate his contract. This is a guy that we sort of expected to be a lock for somewhere in the realm of 20 to 25 goals, just based on his historic performance. But he put together his worst offensive year since coming to St. Louis. And I mean, the Blues were just tired of him. I think, just tired of, just ready to move on, I guess. He was being paid a lot. He had a year and a half remaining on his contract. And instead of trying to negotiate like a buyout for up to 2/3 of his remaining salary, he he agreed to a contract termination. He walked away from $5.4 million. Why do you think he did that? I mean, it's kind of surprising that he did, but I mean, do you have any thoughts on why he would do that?
Well, it felt like the big thing, and I want to say it was Rutherford might have tweeted this out, although I'm not certain on that. Said he wanted to play on an NHL roster, like
Yeah,
that Armstrong and Saad mutually agreed that this was the best. They had gotten to a point where he didn't have a place on the team. Saad knew that, Army knew it, Monty knew it. And they tried to trade him away. And for some reason, the puzzling part to this is that they couldn't find a trade for Brandon Saad. I mean, I know like paying $4 million for a veteran who's not producing is pretty bad, but even like I'm surprised the Blues. I feel like there must have been an offer out there where the Blues retained like at least 50%, maybe, and an a veteran not performing at $2 million, like it would feel. I would think at least like several contending teams would be interested in that deal. So that's the part that I don't really understand. But then, yeah, Saad walked away from a payday so that he could play because at this point,
yeah,
his career is close to finished. And at this point, he's made his millions, I think, and he decided to choose to try and win a Stanley Cup. And on
yeah,
like power to him. It's obviously his decision. Excuse me. But yeah, I think it was just to essentially cup chase, and it was the best move for him at this point in his career. If
yeah.
the difference between $1 million and $4 million didn't make that much of a difference, which for a guy with as long a career as him, I get it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he's already won a couple of Stanley Cups with Chicago, and he's only 32, right? He's not really near retirement age necessarily, so he's still got something left in the tank, I would assume. And like you said, probably just yeah, is still thinks of himself as an NHL player, and he is. He's not an AHL player, despite having a poor season. But I think one of the reasons, I mean, yeah, the biggest issue here is his cap hit. I mean that's why they couldn't move the contract. And yeah, I mean they could have eaten into it, but and retained some salary. But I think still some of the teams that would be interested in him, like I don't know that they would even want that I don't know that they would even want to pay him half of what he's owed. I think you look at a team like the Washington Capitals who have the highest cap hit this season, and they're probably looking to acquire a guy like that this season to try and stack up and put all their chips on the table while they have sort of this magical season going. And a team like that doesn't really have room, I feel like, to take him on not only for the remainder of this season, but also another year as well. So yeah, definitely a tough situation, but um, it may be confusing. It may be confusing that he agreed to terminate that contract, and it may be confusing that they couldn't find a trade. But really, this is if they couldn't get something in return for him, this is the best case scenario for the Blues. They get
Yeah.
his contract off the books. They don't have to pay him anything. They don't have to buy him out. So they essentially save $5.4 million. They free up cap space not only for the remainder of this season but for next season as well. So um, it is pretty good news for the Blues. And as we said with Scott Perunovich, we obviously wish Brandon Saad the best because he's had some good seasons in St. Louis and he's a great player. But why don't we sort of get into the move itself and sort of what this means? So, what do you think is like the reason for this move? Right? Do you think they're just looking to shake things up? That's sort of a um, that's sort of something that Montgomery and Armstrong have talked about. Shaking things up and trying to get something going. Do you think they're folding on the season? Do you think they're just trying to clear cap. Like, what do you think the reason is for this contract termination?
I think it's to clear cap and to clear future cap, and also yes, to shake things up as well.
Yeah,
They had mentioned several times like there, excuse me, there has to be a change. This isn't enough, and yeah, like this can't continue as it stands for
yeah,
the team. And Brandon Saad was a big part of that. Like Monty, yes. Oh man, the shortened names ending in Y are really getting me today. Monty wants to play, as he puts it, blue collar hockey, which I
yeah,
mean, for a team called the Blues, that's just what a bar. But that's the identity he wants the St. Louis Blues hockey club to have, and Brandon Saad is like the antithesis of that. Like, could not find a more different skater to what the culture Monty is trying to build. And as I think, honestly, I do think kind of the. I don't mean to be such a downer, but I think the reality of the Blues might not be there yet is starting to set in with everyone as the playoff race gets further and further away. And
yeah,
at this point, I think it is a little bit in everyone's heads where we are a little bit back to we're it's an evaluation year. Let's see what we have and let's start to build a culture. Let's start to get some buy-in so that
yeah.
players will work harder and work harder together and figure out how to play together and things very intangible things like that. So it really helps with the cap picture for this season, for this off season, and I think it really helps as a cultural move. Will it
Yeah.
lead to a better winning product on the ice? Probably not, but maybe. But regardless, that's sort of hearsay, anyways. That's not the right term. Whatever. Um, I think that this is all to help build St. Louis back into a winning culture.
So you're thinking more more next season than this season, right? You're thinking more long term here.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I'd agree, and I think that makes sense. I mean, really, the Sod experiment wasn't working out any longer, and his spot on the roster, he was another one just sort of occupying a spot and just sort of being a body, and not really bringing a whole lot to the table, especially this season when he's having, like I said, his worst offensive season since coming to St. Louis, and that's tough. Um, but yeah, I mean, they tried to trade him for several weeks. So in terms of how we got here, it's not like it was a snap decision. This is something that they've been working on for a while. They've been trying to trade Brandon Saad, trying to find a trade partner. And Saad did have a no trade clause, but that wasn't the issue. He's been reported to have been willing to waive that. So I think really the issue here is that um, contending teams, right? Teams that would be looking to take on teams that would be looking to get sort of a depth winger or a middle six winger like Saad, just weren't willing to take on that AAV, even if some of it was retained. And I think also, I mean, part of why they struggled to find a trade is that when you so they didn't want to take on that full salary because that's just too much. That's just too much for what Saad is bringing. Um, and then B, if the Blues were to retain that salary, they'd be expecting something decent in return, and maybe they're not willing to give that up. And so I think that's sort of um, how I've sort of broke it down in my head. But um, another interesting thing here that I want to pivot to next, and if anyone has any thoughts on any of the stuff we're talking about, you can let us know in the chat, and we can potentially factor it into our discussion here. But I want to talk about what this means for other players in terms of playing time. So in his presser, or I guess in his media availability or whatever you want to call it, Armstrong specified that he wanted to see Alexander Texier play more. He called him out by name, and he said that he purposely, or very intentionally didn't call up an extra forward from Springfield. So they currently only have 13 forwards on the roster because he wants to see guys like Texier play. That's what he said. So who do you think, other than Texier, and we can talk about him as well, but like, who do you think factors into who we'll see on the ice now. Like who takes over Saad's spot. He was playing alongside Robert Thomas a lot at times. He was getting some first line looks for a while there, and then third line as well, because that second line is pretty much set right now. So who do you think takes his spot and will occupy his role on the Blues as currently constructed?
Well, it feels like the team is truly averse to demoting Jake Neighbors in any real uh, role, whether right or wrong. They want to give the kid playing time, and that's understandable. I mean, even going back to our last episode, I like to see Zach Bolduc take over that
Yes.
role. I
Yes.
think that is a guy who really would benefit from added playing time. And we've been calling for it, and there's good reason to think that.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think Zach Bolduc would be my answer. Otherwise, like maybe you get Buchnevich demoted and Bolduc promoted, or maybe outside of that, it's hard to say. Nathan Walker maybe, because he's just kind of a dog.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not like there's an obvious one um, beyond Bolduc and Texier again, who Army called out by name. I will say Jeremy Rutherford tweeted out today that their practice lineup today saw Texier, Thomas, and Buchnevich on the first line, and then that second line remained intact of Holowich and Kyrou. Then we saw Neighbors, Faxa, Bolduc on the third, and then Torpo, Joseph, and Walker on the fourth. So um, it looks like Texier is the guy. And this is another interesting point that I kind of want to get into. I joked about it at the top, sort of for any of the Moneyball fans out there. Remember with me for a moment the scene where Billy Bean, played by Brad Pitt, is frustrated with the manager of the Oakland Athletics, played by Philip Seymour Hoffman, and he wants him to play. I can't remember the name of the player, but he wants him to play Chris Pratt. He's like, play him at
Pena.
first.
Oh,
Well,
Hatterberg.
yeah, Hedberg. He's like, play him at first. And he's like, no, he's a catcher. And he's like, I want you to play him at first. We've sort of projected this out. It's gonna work. And because the A's had, I guess, this like, this rookie who was performing well, Pena, he was like, no, I make the lineup. I'm playing this guy at first. So Brad Pitt goes out and he trades away Pena. And then he's like, you're playing Hatterberg now. Um, he just manipulated the roster, right, and gave him no other choice but to play the guy that he wanted to see. So that was one of the better scenes, I think, in the movie. I think that's a great scene. But listen to this
You want to
quote
get
from
into Moneyball discussion?
yeah yeah. Let's talk Moneyball. Um, uh, Listen to this quote from Doug Armstrong. He said, "If I want to see Texier play, the less options that the coach has, the more likely he's going to play." It seems like Army's just kind of Billy Beaned Monty there. I don't want to like I don't want to sort of pour gas on a fire that doesn't exist. But I think it's just an interesting quote. Like, do you think there is a potential disconnect between Jim Montgomery and the front office? I think if there is anything, it's small, because Doug Armstrong is crazy about Jim Montgomery, right? He went and fired his head coach and gave Monty a 5-year contract. I know that Armstrong, really likes Montgomery. That's not the question here, but is there sort of like a disconnect between the front office and the head coach when it comes to the lineup that's being put out, uh, the goals of the team, at this point in the season? Like, do you think there's anything there, or am I just imagining that?
I mean, what I can say to that is it's super weird. It's really strange that Montgomery was your guy. Like you
Yeah,
did everything to bring him in, and the fit has just been like a glove.
yeah,
All the numbers are just better. He's just one of the best coaches in the league.
yeah,
But then for like only months to pass, and already, because surely you have to think that Armstrong told Monty, like, I want you to play Texier.
yeah,
Like, There is no report of this, so
This is all
to be
speculation.
completely,
Yeah,
yeah, this is all speculation. But you like common sense would dictate that surely that conversation happened, and for this to be the result to come out of
yeah,
it is just super weird.
yeah.
Um,
It's a little weird. Yeah, and again, I don't want to pour gas on a fire that doesn't exist, like I said.
yeah,
But
exactly.
it was a pretty pointed quote. Like he said, the less options that the coach has, the more likely Texas is going to play. Like it's just it's just interesting, is all I'm saying.
There's not a
And
lot of other ways to read into that.
right, exactly.
Now, like, we should also clarify, like, Montgomery and Armstrong had a very strong relationship
Yes,
before
yeah,
he was even hired to be the head coach. You know, he was in our system forever. Um, I don't think either of us are saying that this is a signal of anything bad coming. It's just sort of a weird thing to keep in the back of your mind.
yeah. In the sense that the Blues are trying to become competitive again, and you really want your front office and your head coach to be on the same page there. Um, Obviously, Jim Montgomery's job is to play the players that he's given, the roster he's given, night by night to try and win that game. Like he's not gonna bench Saad if he thinks Saad is gonna help them win that game just to see Texier play. Like if he thinks that's the right call, that's what he's gonna do, obviously. But I think I don't know. Maybe we're seeing. Could we be seeing Doug Armstrong sort of ready to fold on the season, whereas Jim Montgomery is obviously still trying to win? Because again, that's Monty's job, and that's what he's going to do. So like, I'm not going to fault him for that at all. But like, do you think we could be seeing Doug Armstrong in the front office thinking, it's not our season, right? We put together a run there after we beat Calgary back to back. It was looking good, and then now we've lost, what is it, 4 in a row, 3 in a row, and it's not looking so good anymore. We've got 5 points to make up, and they've got 3 games in hand, so it's just not looking good. Like, what do you think we're seeing here? Do you think we could be seeing the front office folding a little bit on this season?
I honestly hadn't thought about that, and I think that's a really interesting point. Yeah, I could totally see that being the case.
Yeah,
Because I mean, the Cam Fowler trade happened back in November, and then since then, can we really confidently say that the Blues have gotten better as a team? Well, okay, ignore that because yes, we can say yes, the Blues have gotten better as a team, but
yeah,
I still think, yeah, they haven't gotten better enough to the point where you can realistically say that you are a playoff contender. And I don't know. I hate to be unfair or unfun here, but I kind of side with the front office if that is the case. Like, I think being pragmatic about our situation and giving young guys like Texier who
yeah,
could be cheap building blocks of a future team kind of makes more sense than giving Brandon Saad 15 minutes a night.
yeah. Yeah, and especially like in a season where he isn't providing much for you, and he doesn't line up with that identity that you want around for the long term. Yeah, I think it's something to monitor, because I think they could also take it from the standpoint of, and we'll get to this stuff in a second, but I think they could also approach it from the point of clearing cap space to make an acquisition, right? Like we still believe in what we have. Like I think that could be still a potential, like that could be another reason why we're seeing this. But I don't know. I don't know. I'm not Doug Armstrong. I'm not I'm not an insider, so I don't know. But um, yeah, I think those are I
You're
know,
lying.
right? I think those are sort of the two ways that I see this sort of being rationalized. But yeah, another interesting thing, just while we're on this sort of standpoint of what this move means for other players, I don't think it means we're going to see Dvorsky called up. I don't think that's coming. Armstrong sort of reaffirmed his commitment to Dvorsky's continued development in Springfield. He's having a good season. They're not positive he's ready yet. I don't think it's time yet. I think a lot of people are excited to see him, and so we are too. But I still don't think it's time to call him up. I don't want to. I wouldn't want them to rush his development just because they're desperate to get the second wild card spot and lose in the first round to, you know, the Vegas Golden Knights or something. Or I guess you know what I'm saying. But yeah, so anyways, so I don't think we'll see Dvorsky. But what do we think it means for other players who've been around a while? Here's another quote from Doug Armstrong that was interesting. He said, this might be even more interesting. There's been a group that's been here for a while, and things don't seem to be changing. Collectively, you have to start chipping further and further up. That if I were like a player that has been around on the Blues for a while and am not doing so well, I wouldn't be very, I don't know, I wouldn't get too comfortable, I guess. Like, what do you think that means essentially? Like, do you think we could be seeing some other guys that have been around a while? Could they be like sort of on the hot seat? Could they be on the trade block or another potential candidate to get cut from the roster? Like, what do you think about that one?
I'm sorry, I had an audio glitch. Can you repeat the quote?
The quote from Doug Armstrong was, "There's been a group that's been here for a while, and things don't seem to be changing. Collectively, you have to start chipping further and further up." Yeah. What does that
That's
mean?
interesting. I mean, that is interesting because the group that's been here for a while is Shen, Thomas, Booch, Kairu. Unless you're looking at like the defense of Falk and Krug,
Right.
who's not playing, which could be. So maybe this is a Falk thing because he has not chipped in at all. Maybe it's a Booch thing, but I really think with Buchnevich, it's still just kind of a down year that like set him back, and he's still like, while he has been super disappointed, I still don't know that I'm like saying that the Booch contract is a horrible mistake. I believe he's like not even 30 yet. Like
Yeah. It's too soon
it's
to make that call.
probably, yeah, exactly. So I do think that, yeah, that is interesting because yeah, the guys who have been around have been our best players. I mean, Shen and Kairu, and then Robert Thomas is still Robert Thomas even when he's not Robert Thomas.
Yeah.
Um, but so I guess this would probably be either a Falk quote or a Thomas quote. But no, I don't think this is signaling that anyone is getting shipped out, and especially I don't think that this is anyone getting shipped out that we didn't already know had a very good shot at being out the door,
Yeah.
i.e., Justin Falk.
Yeah. For sure. I'm not trying to insinuate in any sense that like Robert Thomas is gone or Jordan Kyrou is gone. Um, yeah, I was thinking more along the lines of the Justin Falks of the world, who, similar to Brandon Saad, are adding very little, if anything, to the team this year, and kind of have a not an albatross contract because it's not like a huge contract that was a huge mistake necessarily, but it is a big contract and it's eating up a significant proportion of their cap and probably one that they will look to move. I mean, they tried to trade Krug away last season, right? And he shot that one down. So Falk is a similar, Falk is in a similar spot, and I wouldn't be surprised if we saw them try to trade him away. On that point, we can break all of these sort of trade speculation ideas down on a later episode. But would you be in favor of a Falk trade? Like what do you and would you be in favor of it going down in a similar way where you're getting very little, if anything, in return?
I think I would. I think I would because of the cap hit. The cap hit is a lot for a player who's giving nothing.
Yeah,
I'm not sure the specific details if there's like a buyout option or if they can just cut him. I would doubt it because he signed a pretty big contract. But 6.5 million makes him the tied for the third highest paid player on the roster. That's not at all reflective of his play on the ice. So yeah, I would be
Yeah.
okay if they try and trade him and they can barely get like late round picks or, at this point, pennies on the dime. Because, like we've said, this team is going nowhere fast if they don't make a big move. And one of the big, big things holding them back from making a big move is this Justin Falk contract. So, yes,
Yeah.
I would be totally okay with that and probably even in favor of it.
Yeah, me too. And I think if they can't pull off a trade this year, that will be coming next year. He's got a no trade clause right now, but that switches to a modified no trade clause next season with a 15 team. Was it a no trade? Let me check. A 15 team no trade list. So there could definitely be some buyers. Maybe not buyer. I mean, I think they'll definitely try to move him next season, if not this season, is what I'm saying. But we can get into that discussion on another episode because I want to sort of bring it back to the Saad discussion here. Do you have any other thoughts, sort of on what this means for, I guess, like the outlook of the Blues this season? I'm thinking any other players that could factor in, or how do you think this will sort of affect the lineup or the performance? Like anything to add there before we sort of talk about a little bit of cap stuff?
Yeah, I think this just is again a good sign for building the identity of this team, and I'd like to see more playing time. I know, I know, uh, Mont Army, goodness, said that Texier is the guy he wants, but
Yeah,
I'm making the Billy Bean Pena move for Bolduc because this should be a young forward that either going to get shipped out this offseason for in that would be in like a massive like blockbuster Mikko Rantanen type trade for a prospect and who looks as good as Bolduc does for that to happen. But it could happen, and honestly, I would push that button. But for a player that is either going to be a massive part of your future or a massive part of building your future, you got to let him play,
yeah,
So I'm looking for more time for the young guys. And
yeah.
it is interesting because if you go back to when the Blues hired Army, Monty,
What's with you today, man?
I promise, like I'm really trying here, guys. I promise. Um, when they hired Jim Montgomery to be their head coach of ice hockey,
There you go.
that um, we looked for like something like, excuse me, we looked for more playing time for the young guys.
Yeah,
Gosh,
yeah, for
and
sure.
and now we're sort of back to where we started.
Yeah, Army, Monty, Scotty. There's just too much, man. Letty. It's too many Y names. You're right. But yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. This is one of the things we wanted to see from Montgomery, who has a track record of being like sort of a gifted coach when it comes to helping players develop, helping young players develop. You look at his time as an assistant coach with the Blues before his time in Boston, and he was a big part of the development of Jordan Kyrou and Robert Thomas. So that was a big sort of item in the plus column for Montgomery when he was hired, as you said, and that's something that I think we would hope that we would have been seeing a little bit more of, I guess. Check out our last episode if you're interested in this discussion. We spent an entire episode sort of diving into why Zach Bolduc deserves more playing time, and other guys too. Factoring guys like Texier into that discussion, Torpchenko into that discussion, and sadly a little bit Scott Perunovich in that discussion before he was traded. But yeah, so check that one out. That was a really good one because yeah, Zach Bolduc, not only does he look good for for the, let me see, literally the youngest player on the roster. He looks good in general. Like he looks like one of the better players on the roster. The quantity isn't there because he hasn't gotten as much playing time, as much ice time as some other guys. But you look at like his rate stats, his points per 60, his goals and expected goals per 60. how he generates scoring chances, and sort of how the team performs around him. He looks like one of potentially like, I don't know, the top seven forwards on this team, maybe even higher. Like he looks really good.
Yeah, I'd probably put it higher.
Potentially top five. Yeah, I mean, like it's not that you're folding on the seat. Like this was the one of the bigger points of the episode is it's not that you're folding on the season and saying let's just play the young guys. It's that you're saying this is a guy who has been one of our best performers. If we want to put together a run here, he might have to be a big part of it. So let's play him. And I think it could serve both functions, but it's not that you're inherently giving up on the season by playing Zach Bolduc. Anyways, yeah, let's bring it back to Brandon Saad real quick. And before we close out, before we wrap up our discussion with our last sort of talking point here, if you're just tuning in, we'd appreciate if you would like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's the best way to help us out. So we really appreciate that. If you'd like to listen on audio, we're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can follow and rate there. We're also on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Note News Pod. We post reels and short form videos, memes, fun graphics, and that's also where we announce when we're going live and if we have special guests, all that stuff. So follow along with us there. We appreciate all that. The other really interesting part of this discussion, Alec, and we have sort of danced around it a little bit and talked about it a little bit already, but let's talk about the cap considerations here. The Blues cap situation has gotten a whole lot more interesting with Saad and his contract termination. So his entire, $4.5 million cap hit will come off the books, as opposed to just getting $1.15 million off the books had he just played in Springfield and finished out his contract. And then they're also saving, I think what was it, $5.4 million in total over the rest of this season and into next season. So yeah, they've got some space. They're also using their LTIR pool this year with Krug injured and out for the season. And to be honest, I'm not sure how this math all entirely shakes out, but I can read you sort of this paragraph as it was explained to me. So the Blues will have $620,000 in cap space once Saad's contract is like officially terminated. But because they've used LTIR, they'll have $1.15 million in projected cap space. But really, what all these numbers sort of shake out to between the contract termination, the LTIR pool, all that. What all that means is that they'll be able to add $5.2 million in AAV by the NHL trade deadline, so by March 7th. So if they want to go out and add, they have a little over $5 million of space to do that. Now, is that something they should do? Is another conversation, but they have that space. And then looking forward into next season, the salary cap is projected to rise, and it's like some early reports suggest that it'll rise to somewhere in the realm of 95 million. It could potentially get even higher, like 97. But it's probably going to be a couple of years before we see a cap ceiling of 100 million, but probably closer to 95 next season. And if that's the case, the Blues, as currently constructed, are projected to have around $10 million of cap space this offseason, which is a pretty sizable chunk. But first, let's sort of bring it back to this season, focus on the short term first. Do you think they should do anything with this new cap space? Are you still thinking they should go out and add someone? Do we still want them to go get Elias Pettersson, which probably isn't going to happen? He probably won't get moved anymore anyway. But yeah, like what do you think they should do with this cap space short term?
That's a tough question. That's a really tough question because it so depends on, are you going for it? And by going for it, I mean, going for a wild card spot.
Yeah.
Can they maybe make a move to like sort of act as a broker for a bigger move, but not like a Rantanen type move, like a much more realistic level trade. Maybe. I mean, I think honestly, it's not a fun answer, but I think I would just sit on the cap, and things can happen. I
Yeah.
don't. If you can find a cheap forward, like probably a cheap rental or a cheap 2-year forward, okay. I sure, I guess. But I don't know that. Yeah, I don't know that this team is gonna. I don't know that I would spend significant draft capital or prospect capital to acquire someone, even if we have the cap space for it. Thinking about everything else that is given up to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the benefit of this move happening at this point in the season is that you've got a little more time. Like if the Blues do get back into it in the next couple weeks, then maybe we could see them look to utilize that space. But if they sort of continue to fall in the wild card standings, I think I'd agree with you that it might not be the end of the world if they do nothing with it, unless they go out and acquire someone who could be around longer term. Like if they could, in some crazy universe, pull off an Elias Pettersson trade, which again, not saying they will, not saying they can, but like that's sort of the scenario where I would be more inclined to take on money and fill out that cap space. Um, Another interesting thing is because they're using LTIR. If they are at the cap by the end of the season, Ryan Suter, who has performance bonuses, um, if any of those aren't paid this season, they will carry over to next year's cap hit. And so I forget exactly how much. I think he's still got around 2.6 million potential to earn in performance bonuses. Like once he hits that 60 games played, that'll be a big one. I can't remember his full the full breakdown of his performance bonuses, but um, it's it's not a little. I mean, it's I think it's in the millions. Should they just look to use their cap space to go ahead and cover those performance bonuses? Like, do you think they should make it a priority to not have that carry over into next season?
Um, that definitely helps, especially because I think this off season is like the time to be watching for like an Elias Pettersson type move.
Yeah,
I really think this off season that something big is coming for the Blues, and if there isn't something big coming from the Blues, I think that is a really bad signal. But getting ahead of ourselves, so yeah, I think clearing any cap you could do at this point
yeah,
would be helpful for that. Again, I don't mean to be a huge downer and just say like it's time to punt on the season, because I don't think it's time to punt on the season, but
yeah,
just this off season and next year is like such a huge chance opportunity for the Blues, but it's not a guarantee, that I would do anything to raise that chance. Because at that point we'll have Snuggerud playing, knock on wood, health permitting. We'll have Dvorsky playing, knock on wood, health permitting, and barring if he just stinks it up the rest of the season. Those two in the mix with year 2 of Bolduc, Jake Neighbors hopefully developing, Jordan Kyrou turning into the star we always thought he would be, a fresh year for Robert Thomas and Pavel Buchnevich, Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway, another year of development.
yeah,
Colton Parayko still being the old Colton Parayko we know. Like, we're so close, and it's all like lining up for this offseason. So I kind of would do anything to make it as easy and as likely for something big to happen this
yeah.
summer.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you. I found the exact numbers on Ryan Suter. So He's got 51 games played right now. So far he has earned the 225K for 10 games, 400K for 30, 500K for 40 games played, and the bonuses he still could earn is another $600,000 once he hits 60 games played. He's only got 9 games till we get to that point, and then an additional 500K for at least 60 games played, and the Blues make the playoffs. So not looking good for that one. So hope I don't want to say hopefully we don't have to pay him that, because that would mean we made the playoffs and that would be exciting. But
That would be pretty cool. I would probably give that up.
yeah. But I mean, should they even try to move him before he plays another 9 games? Like, do you think they should try to look to trade him? Because I think he has proven himself as a serviceable third pair defenseman, who is making very little. Like, the Blues are already paying. They've already paid the vast majority of those performance bonuses. The only thing that the acquiring team would have to pay is his pretty cheap salary, and that 600K. So, like, should they try to move him? What do you think?
I just think at this point, like, the other part of that is you'd have to acquire someone making less than Ryan Suter, which is not going to be easy to find. You'd have to find, like, Scott Perunovich. So, like, kind of no. I mean, maybe like look and field some offers. And hey, if you can get like a second round pick for Ryan Suter, you cannot get that, which is why I'm saying, like, if something is up, then sure, we'll figure it out. Matt Kessel or Leo Loof can just finish out the year being garbage. So maybe you look, but I don't think they should make it like a priority or anything, especially because he's been so helpful to this team, and this team has been really good defensively, and Ryan Suter's is a part of that. And so I think trading away Ryan Suter kind of would be punting on the season, which is just crazy to say. I can't believe we have come so full circle here.
What happened, man?
I know how, like, who saw this outcome coming, right? But yeah, I wouldn't aggressively be trying to make that move. If they did, especially if the package is right, cool. But it's not too much to hang your hat on, I think.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I think I'm more of the mindset of, like, if we're not going to make it, and let's be honest, at this point we're probably not, then get as much out as we can. Like, let's get as much off the books as we can, to re-rack for next season. So let's shift and devote a little bit of time here at the end of our episode to this. So, as I said, as the Blues are currently constructed, right? So if they don't add any players, they will have somewhere in the realm of $10 million in cap space this offseason once the salary cap ceiling rises somewhere to the realm of $95 million. You've got Suter coming off the books. You've got Faxa coming off the books this offseason. Am I missing anyone? Any other, like, any UFAs?
I know Joseph has another year, which is going to be a big contract to look to move.
Right. So anyways, about $10 million to play with, assuming they don't acquire anyone and don't get rid of anyone else, which maybe they should. But yeah, that's sort of what we're looking at in terms of cap space going into next season. What do you want them to do with that? Like, that's enough to go and get 2 solid players. I think they should be cautious not to take on too much money, just because I really want them to extend Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway. I want these guys to be around a while. I'm sold. I could be wrong. I could be a little bit jumping the gun here, but I love these 2 players and want them to be Blues for a while already. I don't care. And so I want them to get some extensions. And so that's another thing to think about. Because they'll be up for RFA in
offer sheets.
They'll be up for RFA in 2026, 27.
And Vancouver's Calgary's gonna double offer sheet them from us. And the city of Edmonton will just explode.
Yeah, for sure. So what do you want them to do with this cap space? Like, do you want them to go and get some dudes?
Well, what I want them to do is I want them to have a video game off season. I want there to be like
Yeah.
six. In my head, the way this works is there's like six moves that need to happen. I kind of just made that number up, so we'll see how many it is as I go through this. But that would make the Blues. I mean, I seriously believe, and I could totally be entirely fan goggles on right now, like brainwashed. But I seriously believe the Blues could be a playoff contender, maybe even a cup contender, but definitely a playoff contender and like a good one by next season.
Yeah.
What I would do is I would get whatever you have to do to get Matthew Joseph's money off the books. That's $3 million for a player who's just not doing anything. I would probably also look to move maybe even like a Toropchenko. Like honestly, I think you could get that from like a I don't know. Stenberg isn't ready to play yet, but I know
You're getting
Sam's been tweeting about Mackenzie McEachran. Is
yeah.
Kaskamaki ready? Vakarchik probably won't be ready.
He's just a negative offensively, and he's not providing enough defensive. I mean,
Exactly.
he's a plus defensively, but he's so bad offensively that he's still a net negative player.
Exactly. I honestly wouldn't hate if they brought back Radek Faxa, but that's not one of my moves. I'm just looking at Puckpedia now and dreaming. So I would move off of the bottom of the roster forwards that are getting paid like middle of the roster forwards. Yeah. The Justin Falk move has to happen. That has to be priority one, really. Like the Justin Falk move, or maybe it's Torrey Krug, but it kind of feels like it's Falk at this point. And honestly, it doesn't matter. Just one of those two guys cannot be on the roster. If you can move a Nick Leddy too, then absolutely yes. But at this point, I don't know that anyone's taking that contract, and I don't think it's so essential. So getting rid of your impending UFAs plus Joseph and Toropchenko and Justin Falk clears, let's see, 6, 8, 11, 14 million on if my quick math is correct. Oh, also if you can like cut or get rid of Sonny, probably I think a 2-year deal for him was a little rich, and that would clear another million. So that's 15 million in cap space.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think it's extension time. Extensions have to happen. And I think it has to be the offer sheet boys and Joel Hofer. I think it's time. Joel Hofer is going to be entering his age 25 season.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a ton of years left. Let me see if I can pull it up really quick.
Well, he's an RFA after this season.
Right. So he is due for a payday. And yeah, same thing with Broberg and Holloway. I think those have to be the priority over signing a free agent. I think free agents come after that. And I would probably be looking at like a middle range free agent, depending. I don't know if I could pull a spot track up fast enough for like projected contracts. And this is getting way too far ahead, but you know what? You asked me about it. I am really a huge Marcus Pettersson guy coming up in this offseason.
Okay. Yeah.
Or is it? I think Ryan Lindgren is the Rangers defenseman who's an impending UFA, I believe, maybe RFA. One of those two. Let's see if I can get some like projected cap number or projected hit. He's making $4 million right now. Excuse me.
Yeah,
I don't think
UFA.
I don't know if I'll be able to find it, but I would sign a guy like that to be like a second pair with Broberg or Parayko or however it signs up. And then after you've pretty much spent all your money, you still probably have to move away a big piece in a big trade. But I think the marquee player of this offseason has to come through a trade. I think unless what they do is sign like a Mitch Marner or maybe a Mikko Rantanen, then like we're talking for sure. I still think I would go the trade route. I think the Blues prospect capital is really deep right now, but if you're looking ahead 2 to 3 years, there's gonna be a log jam. You just can't have all these guys. Their value probably isn't going to get a lot higher. it's gonna hurt now, but to get a guy like an EP40 or a Brady Kachuk or whoever the Blues can locate. So short story to answer your question: extensions come first with cap space, and then you fill in your holes on the roster with the cap space. Is what I would do. I would
Yeah.
not take the Nashville Predators and sign everybody for $4 billion because look how that's turning out.
Yeah, not too good. Yeah, I think your priorities are in a good spot. That's Alex's 6 point plan to building a contender right there. But I think I'd agree. Yeah, focus on your guys first and make sure they can stick around. Um, and I think either by trade or free agency, I want to see them add like two impact players. They don't have to be the Mikko Rantanens of the world or the Mitch Marners of the world. I just want to see them add two impact players. If they could get a star, like that's what they're missing. We've talked about that ad nauseum, but like that would be great. But really, I think around $10 million in cap space is enough to go and get a couple guys that make you a deep team, not just in terms of like bodies on the bench, but in terms of quality guys, in terms of solid guys. So yeah, I think I'd agree with sort of your approach there. I think that's a good one. Um, but we're gonna have to devote more time to this on a future episode. But I mean, really, it's some interesting developments to see Scott Perunovich out and Brandon Saad out. I'm glad we have his contract off the books. But like you, I was a little surprised that they couldn't get like at least a pick for him or something.
I know,
Um,
right?
yeah, it's kind of crazy, but it is what it is, and I will be interested to see what the Blues do with this space. They still sit 5 points back of the Calgary Flames, but the Flames lost on Tuesday to the Capitals and now only have 2 games in hand. So, are the Blues back in it? I don't know. Probably not, but we will be here to monitor it. And yeah, we're gonna have to do some episodes on trade rumors soon, and then of course as we get closer to the offseason, we'll definitely talk more about offseason strategy, what the Blues need to add. But yeah, I hope we see like you ever play franchise mode in MLB The Show?
Mm-hmm.
You ever
I
just
mean,
like for
I'm an OTP guy.
yeah, I
Yeah, I play with spreadsheets.
you do you? Yeah, I one of my favorite things to do is just to take over like the A's or something and then turn them into a World Series winner in like one off season. So yeah, I hope that we get something like that uh, from from Doug Armstrong and Alexander Steen this off season. But we'll be here to cover that for sure. I've got an episode coming up sometime soon where we will do like a tiers ranking system talking about how Blues players are performing, sort of giving them grades and assigning them tiers, as well as Armstrong and Montgomery. So that's coming up. So yeah, stay tuned for that. And then the Blues play the Colorado Avalanche tomorrow night. How will they measure up against a Rantanen-less Avalanche team? We're gonna find out, but um, it'll be interesting. Anyways, I think that'll do it for us this time, but we appreciate everyone for tuning in and for tuning in for a long one. So thanks for joining us. If you're new to Note News, please like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's the best way to help us out. It helps us out a whole lot. And you can follow and rate the podcast wherever you listen. 5 stars, we hope. We love to read those ratings. And we're also on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Note News Pod, where you can follow us, see a lot of cool posts, memes, graphics, videos, and announcements for when we're going live. So if you're if you're enjoying what we're bringing here, then yeah, be sure to follow us there. And yeah, we appreciate all that. We'll see you next time. And Alec, as always, let's go Blues.
Let's go Blues.